My name is Henrik, and I have the pleasure of entertaining you over the next couple of hours, where we'll talk a little bit about sort of life after graduation, and we'll talk a little bit about your personal business model. So kind of looking at yourself as a startup company, and look at how can you sort of optimize your own career path and be more proactive about creating opportunities for yourself, sort of creating your own luck, instead of expecting that after graduating from a great university, you will automatically be set onto this great career track. And somebody's going to come and offer you a phenomenal career, and all you need to do is sort of lean back and let the opportunities come to you. Because if that's your expectations, you will probably be pretty disappointed. Life doesn't work that way, and this traditional sort of career escalator that might used to have existed 20 years ago doesn't exist anymore. It is jammed because of financial crisis and because of how exponential technologies are transforming the workplace and how different industries operate and how society functions as a whole. So usually the way it works that you could step onto the career escalator, and then year after year you would slowly get promoted so that at the end of your career you would stand up here maybe as a vice president or maybe CEO of a larger organization. You'll be able to step off the career escalator to enjoy your pension and retirement. But now a lot of people are not stepping off because they're physically feeling really good and they don't want to stop working, or maybe they lost all their money in the financial crisis. They made some poor choices in terms of investing their pension in risky ways. So now they're staying up here at the top of the escalator. So all the middle managers can't get promoted, and it becomes really difficult to get an entry-level job. In many parts of the world, we have very high levels of youth unemployment. So it can be difficult to get an entry-level job. That's why some people then pursue more of an entrepreneurial path and sort of create your own job instead of trying to apply for one. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. But essentially, what we'll talk about today is the startup of you. So what can you do to create the most exciting opportunities for yourself in your life? And how can we become more strategic about creating those opportunities so we can optimize our life path in different ways. So today is not going to be just me talking. It's going to be very interactive. I'll show you a couple of different practical frameworks that you'll have some time to fill out and discuss with one another. So that's sort of the plan. How does that sound? Good? Cool. So some of you already seen me before. You know that I'm a crazy Danish dude, grew up in a small country called Denmark. This was me 30 years ago. Moved to San Francisco about 7 years ago to be part of the Silicon Valley startup ecosystem. So I'm an entrepreneur myself. I've started 5 companies in my career so far. Currently working on 2 tech startups in different spaces. One in digital signage, where we have developed a technology to enable anyone to remotely control what's being displayed on a flat screen panel. So essentially a small USB device. It's an HDMI stick, looks like a USB, that you plug into a flat screen panel, and then you can remotely control what's being displayed. So we're selling that to different types of stores for in-store marketing, for large conference venues, for hotel receptions, and so on. And the other company I'm working with, a Danish company called Cargoflux, we've sort of built a software system to manage the communication between trucking companies and truckers and freight forwarders and the end customers, to try to break down this very manual workflow. If any of you have any interest in any of those industries, we can talk about that further. But otherwise, most of what I do is kind of working as an entrepreneur, and then I travel around the world to work with young people like yourself in this company called Startup Experience. I work with a bunch of different universities and larger organizations on sort of helping people adopt this entrepreneurial mindset and becoming more entrepreneurial in various ways. So enough about me, a little bit about you. So in order to sort of tailor this talk to be most relevant, I'd love to hear a bit about why you're here. What made you sign up to spend 2 hours with this crazy dude talking about your life path? What would you like to take away from today's session, and sort of what made you come here? I assume you could have other interesting things to do with your Friday evening. So something must have brought you here to stick around for a little bit longer. What made you show up?
I want some ideas.
Yeah? So you're a student at this moment? Okay. and thinking about the future and what that might bring?
Yeah.
A bit unsure, like most people are, right? And also, it's interesting to then talk to successful people and look at, well, what kind of plan did you have for yourself at the beginning of your career? And I would say, like, all of the people I've talked to so far end up doing completely different things than what they set out initially, or what they initially had in mind. The career path is typically very unpredictable, but having a plan can at least give you some direction. If you don't even have a vision for what you want to accomplish, it's very unlikely you're going to achieve those things. So, okay, so that's more sort of, you're exploring different things and would like to be a bit more structure around it? Yeah? Anyone else? Why are you here?
I'm currently a student, but also working on a business.
Okay.
So just sort of trying to think about whether to continue studying or to just develop some more flexible skills.
Yeah. So you probably have a business model for your company.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
but
yeah.
a business model for yourself seems like a good idea, potentially. Yeah. The most important startup, I mean, more important than any other company you can start, is of course the startup of yourself, and how you can create the most exciting, interesting opportunities, and stopping up, reflecting about that could be worth it. Okay, good. What are you doing here?
To get some clarity, really.
Yeah.
Just to get like some kind of direction, because it's so overwhelming now, and there's like all kinds of different things that you can do.
Have you tried to make a plan
Yeah,
once before?
Yeah, but it's so big because you want to do like a whole bunch of things. You're just like, where do I start?
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Any other things? Sort of like to get clarity on? Or we're just here to experience the show. Yeah. How to be more competitive?
It's a very competitive environment.
It is a very competitive one. Yeah.
Stand out, especially when everybody is so brilliant.
Yeah. What is your unique competitive advantage as a human being? Yeah. And how are you going to compete against the robots that are coming soon? Yeah. Okay. That's a really that's a good point, and that's one of the things we'll talk about today as well. I guess what you're all really excited about. How many are still studying? So you haven't graduated yet? Okay, great. So you're really excited about graduating into getting a job somewhere, right? And coming out and working in the workplace. Looks really exciting, doesn't it? Right? It's an amazing world that's waiting for you out there. Some of you attended the lecture the other day where I also brought up this example, but where a lot of people end up working in these cubicles. And what ends up happening is what? What will happen after a while? You get bored, and you start doing one specific thing day in and day out, and what happens to your brain? Yeah, you become heavily specialized in doing just one thing really well, and you forget about sort of challenging yourself to do other things, and eventually you will die. Hopefully not. But one of the things that can happen is definitely that you become heavily specialized in just doing one thing really well. And that's very good for the company, but it might not be so good for you. Because what happens then down 5-10 years down the line when they no longer need this special position, right? And especially in a world where things are changing faster and faster and faster, everything is being disrupted. And the types of skills you have today will be obsolete 5-10 years from now. So if you accept to take a position where the company just makes you do one specific thing really well for a long period of time, eventually you will be replaced by a robot or some kind of software system, and then you're in deep trouble because you haven't kept up your skills with what else is needed in the workplace. You haven't been able to sort of adapt and update your own skill set and your own resources. And then you might find yourself in a position where you will have a really hard time finding another job. So what we do as entrepreneurs is that we constantly, or as entrepreneurial individuals, is that we constantly try to challenge ourselves to get out of our comfort zone and try to become more entrepreneurial. And the good news is we already have this sort of inner entrepreneur deep inside us. We were born entrepreneurs. Like the most entrepreneurial people I can think of was people back in the Stone Age, where you had to be entrepreneurial in order to survive. You had all kinds of problems that were facing you. Like what? What kind of problems did you have back in the Stone Age? Food is not a problem. What is the underlying problem that food is a solution for? You're hungry, right? So that's the problem. So you're hungry, and if you don't find food, what happens? You will die. right? So you have a pretty good incentive to be creative, to be resourceful, to be entrepreneurial, to fix that problem. Because if you don't, you will die. But today, when we live in this cushy society, we have all kinds of other people who can come in and solve our problems for us. So we no longer have the same type of responsibility for our own survival. And we start losing some of that entrepreneurial mindset and some of that entrepreneurial resourcefulness. So we want to find that inner caveman or inner cavewoman and start becoming entrepreneurs once again, where we can solve our own problems and we're not afraid to sort of use our own creativity to do so. We're standing here. If we look sort of at the progression of humanity, most futurologists agree that we're standing right here. It's been somewhat of a linear progression, but humanity will change more in the next 20 years than it has in the previous 300. And that's something that for us as human beings is very hard to comprehend, because the way we try to project the future is a projection of the past. So we look at the past 5 years and say, okay, the next 5 years is going to be somewhat comparable. But that doesn't work if we're standing here, does it? Everything is changing faster and faster, and we simply cannot even comprehend what that's going to look like. I mean, imagine taking somebody from the 18th century and asking them how we're living our lives today. It would simply not be possible. They'll probably not predict that we have these kind of devices, these phones in our pockets, and you can either swipe left or right, and that will determine your future spouse, like who you're going to live with for the rest of your life. I'm pretty sure they didn't see that one coming, right? Back in the days. I don't think so. And it's equivalent to sort of asking somebody from the 18th century how we're living our lives today, the equivalent to ask you what life is going to be a decade or two from now. So it's simply impossible. We don't know what that's going to look like, but it's pretty certain that it's going to be fundamentally different. Like AI, biotechnology, advanced robotics, drones, all these different exponential technologies are just changing everything in the workplace. And we don't know what's going to look like, but we do know that we need to be entrepreneurial in order to not become obsolete. So being an entrepreneur is no longer a choice. We all need to start adopting this entrepreneurial mindset in order to not be left behind. So with that being said, first exercise of the day. Have some of you read this book called 7 Habits of Highly Effective People? How many of you read that? Okay. Heard of it? Good. So Stephen Covey is a very famous book, sort of on helping you with different types of strategies throughout your life. Did you read it recently, or was it a long time ago? Long time ago. Do you remember an exercise called Start with the End in Mind? It's a pretty powerful exercise that we're going to try to do right now. So I'd like you all to grab pen and paper. You'll need that for several different exercises throughout the day today. Or we're going to try to build your personal business model. But starting with sort of looking at the end. Okay. If you don't have paper and pen, I'm sure we can find it somewhere for you. I have some extra paper if you need it. Anyone need extra paper? You good? Yeah. You can write on the back side of these. Cool. There you go. Anyone else needs paper? Are we good? Alrighty. So the way this goes is that initially, you need paper?
Yeah.
Oh, a pen? I have a couple of extra sheets here. Okay. Good. So first step in this little exercise is that we're going to go on a journey together, and you're going to basically sit back in your chair and close your eyes. And then you imagine that you're going to go to one of the most important events you've ever attended in your life. And you walk into this really big room, and you see it's full of people that you know, full of people that you met throughout your entire life, your best friends, your loved ones, your colleagues, your family, people that you've done sports with, people you studied with back in the days. Basically, everyone that you hold dear is in this room. And you sort of start walking up the center aisle here, and you see that in the front of the room, there's a table. And on that table, there's a big box. And in that box, you open it up, and you find yourself lying inside that box. You're at your own funeral. Hopefully many, many years from now, you're attending your own funeral, and now people start standing up one by one. You sort of, the people that you love the most, the people that are really close to you, could be colleagues, people who you met at various events. And one by one, these people start telling stories about you. They talk about what were the things they really appreciated the most about you. They talk about your best qualities and your worst behaviors. They talk about experiences that you've done together, trips that you've been on together. And basically, all of those things that sort of make up the story of your life. And the exercise now is that you can open your eyes and you can try to select 5 people that are really close to you. And maybe 5 people from different groups, from different circles. So a couple of family members, maybe a couple of people from your school or from your workplace, a couple of people that you do sports with, and some of your really close friends. And then you try to write down a couple of things about what you would like them to say about you. So it's kind of writing your own urology, or writing the speech that you would like them to give about you and the way you lived your life, some of the core values that they remember you for, some of the core qualities, some of your main accomplishments, and some of the things that you will be remembered for. So let's take 5 minutes right now where you try to write down some of those things, both in terms of personality characteristics that you've known for, and things you've done in your life, the ways you behaved in front of other people, what people remember you for. What impact did you have? Okay, so let's take 5 minutes and just individually think a little bit about that. Okay, how did that go? Obviously, this exercise can take a lot longer, and ideally what you would do is actually pick those sort of 5 to 10 individuals and write a full paragraph, kind of write the speech that they would give from their perspective. So like, from their perspective, what exactly, how would they frame this speech about you when you're dead? So it's kind of a scary exercise, but it does help us sort of get a very clear picture about the type of person we would like to be described like, right? So what is it that kind of person we strive to become? And then the good news is that you're not dead yet, right? You're still here. You still have an amazing opportunity to frame who you will become and how you're going to live the rest of your life. But there's a big difference between people that then sort of have this vision about who they want to be and how they want to act and what they want to be remembered by, and the values they would like to be known for, and then the people that sort of take the conscious choice to try to become that person instead of just living your life on autopilot and just letting yourself sort of flow through life. And we'll see what kind of opportunities we come across. We'll see what kind of individuals we'll have a chance to influence throughout our lives. But you will probably be much more likely to achieve this great vision if you are conscious about the choices you make and really try to revisit, well, who am I today? What would my friends say about me today? Some of you last night, we talked about the art of networking, and one of the exercises there is that you take sort of 5 of your really close friends that know you really well, and then you ask them, like, what is the first word that comes to mind when you think about me? Right? Try to get a couple of input on how do they see you, and then you could sort of start reflecting on, well, is that image in the same as I want them to think about them? Is that the word I want to be remembered for? Or do people kind of have the image that I want them to have of me, right? Do I have that level of integrity that I want? Do I live up to those ethical standards that I believe I have, but maybe I'm not quite acting that way? Okay, so that seems like a good exercise, and a good to sort of start with the end in mind, because that kind of gets us started about thinking about, well, who do I actually want to become and what do I potentially want to accomplish? Another kind of exercise that you can try at some point is to create like a cover story about yourself. So imagine the newspaper is writing a story about you at some point, 20 years from now or 10 years from now, whatever it might be, highlighting some of your accomplishments, and sort of in that interview looking at what are the specific things you feel like you've learned or that you get quoted by, what are the big headlines, where have you been, what were the specific moments in your life. So that could be another way of sort of doing it. So today, given like who I am, and sort of we will have that entrepreneurial perspective on things, and I feel it's quite a useful framework to use. Even though you're not going to end up starting your own business or becoming an actual entrepreneur, then it's just in this day and age, we all need to be fairly entrepreneurial. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about that. And in relation to that, what is a startup company? Have you heard of that? You've heard of a startup, right? But what is the definition of a startup? Do you know? Is it similar to just a small version of a big company, or is it something else? It's completely different.
Yeah.
Okay.
You don't have a physical concept within a startup like
Okay.
paying customers.
You don't necessarily have paying customers.
Well, I guess you have a physical concept, but it's just a concept. It's not moving. There's not people under you that you've employed. It's not all the operations at a large scale.
So it's a much smaller entity where you don't have the specialized resources in all the different fields, and you kind of need to wear the different hats. And yeah.
It's disruptive.
It might be disruptive to an industry, especially when we're talking high growth startup. But one of the main differences is that in a startup you have a ton of uncertainty. Like you essentially don't know what you're doing yet. That's a startup, right? A startup is that you're testing out a new concept for a business. You're probably trying to disrupt an industry and do something 10 times cheaper, 10 times better, 10 times more user-friendly than any other products in this industry or in this category. So per definition, there's a lot of uncertainty. And in a startup, your job as a founder is to eliminate some of this uncertainty. So a startup is a temporary organization designed to search for repeatable and scalable business model. So per definition, in a startup, you're very agile. You're trying to constantly adapt to what customers want and trying to make sure that you're building something people want. And that's sort of like the main analogy I just wanted to use today, that in a startup, if you're not creating value to your customers, they're not going to pay for your product and you're going to go bankrupt. And I feel like there's a very close connection to that in how we need to act as individuals in the workplace. If we're not creating value to our employers, we don't have a job. We won't have a job in the future because we will be replaced by somebody else, or we'll just get fired. So we need to think of ourselves sort of like a startup, and it's like, well, how can I search for a business model for myself? So I search for a skill set that I can build, and so I can become resourceful and add a lot of value to either my employer or in a startup to my own customers. The sort of life journey for an entrepreneur sketched out by this gentleman called Paul Graham from YC. Have you heard of YC? Y Combinator. So Y Combinator is one of the probably the first and most famous startup accelerator in the world. So if you have a great idea for a company or you started working on it, but you need some help from mentors and maybe you need some capital infusion, you can go into this accelerator and then they will have all these super competent, experienced people that will help you propel your startup forward at a much faster pace than what you would otherwise accomplish. So essentially the idea is that you will accelerate your business equivalent to like 1 or 2 years of progress in 3 months. So you give up 6 to 10% equity in your company and you get a little bit of seed funding for your company, and then essentially you'll get a ton of mentoring and they will help you fine-tune your business models to find product market fit in a short amount of time. And the sort of life journey for an entrepreneur, for those of you who are interested in, how many of you are interested in potentially becoming entrepreneurs? Okay, many people here. Fantastic. So, so this might add some interesting perspective. In general, right before you start your business, your happiness level is equivalent to pretty much everyone else in the world. You're sort of moderately happy. What happens then the day you decide to start a business? It goes up because you're really excited and everyone comes over and congratulates you. Now you're starting, you're pursuing your dream, you're trying to create a great impact in the world. Congratulations, that's amazing. And then what happens pretty much inevitably on day two? Boom, yeah, reality sets in. You figure out that this is going to be way more expensive to build this product. And you figure out that when you talk to customers, no one cares about the product or the problem you think you had to solve. No one actually has that problem, or they're not willing to pay money for a solution to this problem. So now you enter this stage in an entrepreneur's life called the trough of sorrow, which is this miserable time in an entrepreneur's life where you're trying to desperately experiment and try to find product market fit. You're trying to find out what is the type of product that I can build that people are willing to pay money for. And many startups will fail in this process. They either give up due to co-founder conflicts, they have a huge fight and then they quit the project, or they run out of money, or they just decide that they're going to go take a real job instead and not go through all this suffering because they get tired of living in their mom's basement on ramen and oatmeal. But hopefully for you, something will start working someday, and then you find what we call product market fit, where you're building something people want, and then your life changes for the better. This is a very exciting time in an entrepreneur's life where everything changes, and now you can raise a lot more capital, and you can start moving from searching to execution. But the big problem is that a lot of people start scaling prematurely. They start executing on the wrong idea. They don't spend enough time testing the validity of their idea, testing all the different risky assumptions they have about their business, and then they end up trying to sell a product that has no real potential. So that's a little bit about what's in store for you, my friends. All of those of you who plan to become entrepreneurs, you're probably going to go through this roller coaster like all the rest of us. Of course, maybe you get lucky, but typically entrepreneurs have to fail a couple of times before we are successful. And it can be extremely tough, but it can also be extremely satisfying. And one of the cool things about being an entrepreneur, if you are somewhat successful, is that you eventually will have a lot more freedom than anyone else in the workforce, right? Because if you're an employee, you will, for the rest of your life, exchange time for money. And hopefully at some point you will start becoming really well paid, but you're still exchanging time for money, which means that you have to go to the workplace and you have to do certain things that people above you will tell you to do. So you don't have the same freedom as somebody who has taken themselves out of this money-making equation. So if you are able to sort of build a scalable business at some point, you don't no longer need to sort of be there in front of the computer or physically in the office to make money. You can be on a beach somewhere, or you can be sleeping, or you can be doing whatever you want to be doing. So freedom is one of the main reasons why you might want to consider going on this crazy roller coaster ride. Like, it's not for most people. Are not willing to put in the effort. Entrepreneurs do for a few years what most people won't, so that they can live the rest of their lives like most people don't, right? But it takes a lot more effort than just taking a job. It's 100 hours a week for 5 to 10 years, and your company might fail, and it might all be for nothing. Hopefully you learned a lot along the way so that you will be able to be more successful next time. But it's not an easy game. I'm not here to paint this rosy picture that, oh, go be entrepreneurs, have a great idea, raise a couple $1 million, and it's going to be easy. Because that's not what it is like to be an entrepreneur. It's super tough, but it can also be worth it down the line. So one of the sort of tools that we use in the startup world is that we try to build a business model for our companies. Right? Makes a lot of sense. It used to be that the way we taught business or entrepreneurship in business school was that we would ask you to fill out a 50-page or 100-page long business plan. Have any of you written in business plans? Yeah, that's a lot of fun, right? Super fun to spend 6 months trying to write this long paper. And then when you're done and you finally manage to to print it out, you figure out that it was all just a bunch of BS. And there's no connection to reality whatsoever. You sat in the conference room and you made all this stuff up. But reality is that the partners that you thought were partnering with you might not want to partner with you. The price point that you had envisioned for your product might be way too low or way too high. And maybe the problem you think you're solving is not a real problem. And the features in your product are not that relevant for your customers. So what we do today, instead of writing these long business plans that turns out to often be a waste of time, is that you map out the key components of your business on a one-sheet template that we call a business model, or a business model canvas. And this tool was invented by a gentleman from Switzerland called Alexander Osterwalder. I'll say Alexander Osterwalder, no, don't need to remember that. So he came up with a business model canvas. He wrote a book called Business Model Generation. Later on, Ash Moray came up with a lean canvas. And some of the guys from Lean Startup Machine came up with a validation board. I've created my own version of this called the Startup Canvas that I can give you access to if you're interested. So all of those are sort of for businesses. And the key components of a business model is that any company can be described using 9 building blocks. And the same goes for you. But let's first have a quick look at what a business model looks like for a company, and then we're going to try to modify this framework to work for us as individuals.
An organization's business model can be described with 9 basic building blocks: your customer segments, your value proposition for each segment, the channels to reach customers, customer relationships you establish, the revenue streams you generate, the key resources and key activities you require to create value, the key partners, and the cost structure of a business model. But it's not sufficient to just enumerate the 9 building blocks. What you really want to do is to map them out on a pre-structured canvas. This is what we call the business model canvas, a tool that helps you map, discuss, design, and invent new business models. Let's briefly go through the 9 building blocks, starting with the customer segments. These are all the people or organizations for which you're creating value. This includes simple users and paying customers. For each segment, you have a specific value proposition. These are the bundles of products and services that create value for your customers. Channels describe through which touch points you're interacting with customers and delivering value. Customer relationships outline the type of relationship you're establishing with your customers. The revenue streams make clear how and through which pricing mechanisms your business model is capturing value. Then you need to describe the infrastructure to create, deliver, and capture value. The key resources show which assets are indispensable in your business model. Key activities show which things you really need to be able to perform well. Partners show who can help you leverage your business model, since you won't own all key resources yourself, nor will you perform all key activities. And once you understand your business model's infrastructure, you'll also have an idea of its cost structure. So with the business model canvas, you can map out your entire business model in one image. This works for startup entrepreneurs just as well as for the most senior executives.
What do you think of that? It's a lot more fun than writing a 100-page business plan, I can promise you that. So the interesting equivalent to this is, so for those of you who are entrepreneurs in here, how many of you have filled out a business model canvas? 2 people? Okay. So I would strongly recommend that all the rest of you check out this framework. It's a really great tool to very quickly map out all the key elements in your business and get a good overview of how everything is interconnected. So at businessmodelgeneration.com/canvas, or just businessmodelgeneration.com, you can find this canvas. You can download it for free. You can also just Google business model canvas, and then you'll find a PDF version you can download and print out. It takes about 45 minutes, an hour to get a first version of your business model, and it's a really great way to get an overview of how all the different aspects of your business. And then what you need to realize is all we have here when you filled it out is a list of guesses. that these are just all assumptions and hypotheses. That this might be true, but what we need to do as entrepreneurs is to eliminate all the uncertainty by validating every one of those risky assumptions in our business. Okay, so today we'll talk more about the business model for yourself, which is a great tool to sort of reinvent yourself and become more strategic about how can you navigate this constantly changing world. So it's a way to sort of create somewhat of a strategic plan for your own life, and then you can revisit that every now and again and continuously test whether you are actually on a track to create the kind of value you want, and the type of relationships you have right now, do they make sense to you? Or should you maybe try to eliminate some of the customers that you're currently serving and try to find some new ones? Should you try to update the type of skills you have, the resources you're currently offering in various ways? So when we're trying to sort of look at our career, the sweet spot is somewhere in between the interests that we have, what we're really passionate about, the skills and the abilities we have, and your personality and your kind of personal preferences. Right? That's ideally, typically where most people want to be. If you're too far up here, like you're trying to get a career in something that you're really passionate about, but you kind of suck at doing that. Like I could aspire to become a professional painter, but I wouldn't make a whole lot of money doing that, right? So of course you can be like cost-benefit analysis that, well, I'm really happy just living in a cave somewhere as long as I can keep painting. Then okay, great, then you can go ahead and do that. But if you want to be sort of successful from a traditional perspective, you probably want to find somewhere in that intersection between what you like to do, what you like to work on, where you like to live, and the types of skills that you currently have or that you can somehow acquire. So your personal business model looks similar to the framework that you just saw in the video, but everything is sort of changed to be about you. So initially, we look at what are the key resources that you have as an individual. So those are the types of skills. What have you studied? What are your own unique competitive advantages? So what do you feel like you're really good at? Are you really good at communicating? Are you really good at visualizing stuff as a visual artist? Are you a great musician? Are you great at managing teams? Are you great at physics or math or engineering or whatever it might be that you have? We all have different sets of skills. So what is the sort of current set of skills that you have that you can offer to the world in various ways? And then currently, what are you doing? Like, what are the types of activities that you're doing in order to create value to the different types of customers? And when we're talking about customers in this aspect, who are the different customers that you are serving in your life? And we're defining that very broadly. What kind of customers do you have? Could be your family members. What's that? Yeah, your friends, right? You're providing value to your friends. So those are your customers. What about your parents and your siblings? What about your uncles? Are they also your customers? Maybe not one of the main customers, but hopefully some of your family members are. Colleagues? Yeah. Your boss, maybe? Maybe you're currently working with a specific client who is very literally your customer. And then we start thinking about, well, what are our revenue streams and the benefits we get from working with these different individuals? So this is, of course, from a monetary perspective, like if you have a boss and you have a job, how much money are you making? What is your hourly rate, and how are you making money? But apart from just money, what else do you get out of these different relationships, of serving these different customers that you have in your life? Why do you have a girlfriend or a boyfriend? Like, what do you get out of that? Some kind of fulfillment, hopefully. Some kind of happiness, some kind of satisfaction. From being with your family members, you might find meaning in life, or maybe you're also serving in a non-profit, or you're volunteering your time to some people that are your customers. What do you get from that? Right, so all those things go down in this box where you become very concrete about trying to figure out, well, what are the things that I get from serving all these different people? And what is the specific value that I offer to them, right? So customers over here, linkage to the value that you offer to those different people. That will be different depending on the category of customers, of course. Channels is how do you get that value to, how are you serving those customers? Like some of them might be more in a virtual capacities. Sometimes you're serving your family members with a phone call or an email or a text or an image on Instagram or whatever it might be. That can be a way of serving those customers. Maybe your employer, you have to actually show up in person somewhere. So that's the channel that you have transportation to go to that venue. And how are you building the relationships with your customers? How do you find those customers? And how do you keep maintaining those relationships over time? What are the different partners that enables you to deliver this, to create and deliver this value to those people? So in your professional role, you typically have to collaborate with different people in order to serve your end customers. But maybe there are also other ways that you have different types of partners that allow you to create and deliver value to your customers. And lastly, what are the costs? What do you think costs are in relation to this? Time, right? That's one of the really big ones. And how do we prioritize? How much time does it take? And also, if you have a job that's far away, there's the transportation cost. Like, so the cost of transportation, but also the time you spend every morning getting in your car, every evening getting home from work. That's a cost. What about the stress that your employer puts you through? Or that maybe one of your friends put you through because they're constantly nagging, they're constantly negative, they're constantly pulling you down. That's a stress factor that might want to evaluate that relationship. Well, what do I get out of that? Maybe I feel some kind of fulfillment by helping this individual, so it becomes worth it. But you can start doing that cost-benefit analysis if you start articulating, well, what are the costs for me in maintaining this relationship? Maybe you have a spouse who's pissing you off all the time and constantly bringing you down or mistreating you in various ways, right? There are a lot of cost in being in a relationship. It can be pretty stressful in many ways. So the exercise now is to sort of try to fill out your personal business model and try to think about the different roles that you have in life, right? So you might be a teacher, you might be a student, you might be a family member, you might be a son or a daughter to your parents, you might be a mother or father to your kids, an uncle, a cousin. What are the different other roles that you have in society? You might be a volunteer in a sports club, you might be, an athlete, you might be whatever it might be. And try to sort of write down and also figure out, or at least reflect on, what do I get out of each of these roles? Is it worth it? Like the cost of doing that versus what I actually get out of it. And sometimes in evaluating these things, it becomes very clear that, maybe I shouldn't keep doing this. Maybe I shouldn't keep seeing this person, or I shouldn't keep functioning in this role in my life because it doesn't give me enough to justify all these different costs. So this is the business model of you. So how about we try, let's try to distribute some of these, and you can just send them around. And we'll take, it typically takes about 20 minutes. I'm just going to put on a little bit of music, and we will then fill these out. And what happens afterwards is that you get to present this, not in front of everyone, but 2 and 2, will, or 3 and 3, whatever you prefer, will sort of team up a little bit, because one of the key things in filling out a business is the accountability aspect of it, right? So going forward, this is sort of your life plan also, where you sort of evaluate and then you start reflecting on, well, are there certain things here that I want to, can you just pass these around, that I want to change, that I'm not happy with necessarily. So let's give it a try and see what you find out. How does everyone feel? It's a nice little introspection on a Friday evening, isn't it? Was it how was it to fill it out? Was it confusing?
Because you gotta think about everything.
Yeah?
But life was almost saying the same things, different.
Yeah.
Okay. So you felt there was a lot of repetition?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And then it's just trying to reword it so it sounds like there's something there.
Yeah. No framework is perfect. I didn't build this myself either. I can't take credit for it, nor can I be criticized for it. But was anyone like sort of surprised by some things, or sort of felt like you got a good overview out of it? Was it useful? Yeah? It shows you where you spend your time, yeah. Uh-huh. If you're, then what you're currently doing, yeah. So in a couple of minutes, I'll ask you some kind of triggering questions and might challenge some of the things in your canvas. But right now, I'd like everyone to just grab their canvas and a pen and stand up and come down here. Cool. Alrighty. And then I'd like you to go up to a person that you've never talked to before. And then we're going to pair you up like that, 2 and 2. So you cannot be paired up with somebody that you had a conversation with before. So find somebody, some stranger that you've never met before, and get together 2 and 2. Okay. So, all right, my friends, you're just jumping into it. That's awesome. So you all found a partner? Is there anyone who doesn't have a partner yet? Shh, hey, 2 seconds, guys. Good. So you all have a partner? Great. You can feel free to sit down again, or you can be standing, whatever you prefer. But the way this runs is that you get to present sort of the current business model for your life as it is today, and maybe also some of your future aspirations or some of the things you'd like to change. So one person agrees to present initially first, so present your business model in like 2-3 minutes, and then the other person gets to challenge some of those existing conditions and ask you some critical questions about, well, do you enjoy serving all these customers? And why are you serving these customers when you have these skills? Have you thought about these other ways of doing it? Are there certain things that you're currently not super happy with? So this might get a little personal, but that's all part of the game. So the idea is to sort of try to just not necessarily provide advice, but at least sort of challenge some of the existing conditions. And then when one person is sort of done, then you swap around and the other person will do it. So we'll just have 5 minutes per person. And 5 minutes, 5 minutes starting now. All right, everybody, if we can find a seat here. It seems like the conversation is going well. Yeah,
still going a little
that's
bit.
good. That's good. Awesome. A lot of good conversations. How was that to share your life purpose with a complete stranger? It was not too awkward. Now you know each other pretty well in a very short amount of time. So I hope this was somewhat of a useful exercise to sort of try to map out some of those different elements. And one of the things that of course also helps you do, or sort of forces you to do, is that to reflect a bit on what success looks like for you. Because that's one of the big questions we need to figure out, sort of what drives us in life, what is most important. And these things probably change over the course of your life. At certain points in life, certain things will be really important, and then 10 years later you're like, what was I thinking? Why was I focused so much time and energy on doing this? When really what matters in life is that. And they're very individual, sort of what's worth it to focus on. At certain stages, you really want to focus on money. Money will create happiness, right? And then maybe later on you figure out that's actually not the truth. Really what we should try to optimize for is have freedom to spend the time with the people we enjoy spending time with, and work on things we're passionate about, or maybe to give back to the community, to try to find meaningful connections in other ways. Maybe you want to travel, or you just want to have a quiet life where you can enjoy silence instead of working in a big city with a lot of turmoil. And so definitely a good exercise, I find, to sort of think about these things every now and again and kind of pull out that canvas and say, well, what has changed? What kind of customers am I serving today? Am I happy to serve all these customers? Am I interested in my work? Do I actually enjoy what I do? How do I spend my time? So yeah, this, as some of you pointed out, this sort of forces you to at least look a little bit about what do I spend my time on. But another interesting exercise is to sort of look at the past week, just like day by day, and look at, well, how have I prioritized my time? Who do I spend the most time with? And is that in accordance with the sort of starting with the end type of exercise? When I wrote out those speeches, what I want people to say about me, does that correlate to the way I spend my time today? Like, have I sort of lived up to those values? Have I focused on those projects that I like to be known for? Have I prioritized spending time with my family and my friends and those that I care about spending time with? And oftentimes we see that we might not be 100% in alignment with where we would like to spend our time. It's actually not where we are spending our time. So that can also give room to some reflection. You could cross out all the things you don't like to do and then aim to change those things and say, well, I don't want to spend so much time on X, and I refuse to do it. So now I'm going to put in motion some kind of plan to actually change it, instead of just accepting that what life brings you and the situation you're in. Try to be more proactive about creating it. Do you enjoy serving all the customers you're currently serving? Could you do it in a better way? Would you be able to cut down on the time you're spending with certain customers and maybe try to find new ones? Another interesting thing is to sort of think of 5 new customer segments that you could serve with your skill set. Right, so we all have amazing skills. Like, what other customer segments could we potentially serve? Like, how could we create value for a completely different group of customers, and what type of value would we also gain from those interactions? There might be ways that you could provide a tremendous amount of value without that costing you a whole lot of time or money, but we just don't do it for whatever reason. That can enable you to potentially pivot into a new area. How could you double your income? So it's an interesting thing. Or maybe instead of just doubling it, how could you increase it by 10-fold? How would you be able to do that, to completely break out of this current system where you every year get a 5% increase in salary? Maybe you're super happy with that, but is there a way to doubling it? Would there be ways to sort of practice this kind of lifestyle hacking? Or maybe instead of trying to double your income, is there a way that I can cut my expenses in half, which would allow me to take 6 months out of every year and go on some retreat to Thailand and live on a beach? Right? There's many ways of living life. We don't have to live life the way that society sort of tells us is the norm, that you do need to work those 50 weeks a year. I mean, isn't that a little silly that we only live for our weekends and those 2 weeks of a holiday a year? I have a hard time accepting that. Recognizing that it's not just about being intelligent and being smart, acquiring technical skills. It's as much about having good people skills, being good at building relations with other people. Last night we had a session where we talked about networking and the art of building relations in a good way. It turns out that technical skills and the knowledge you have only account for about 15% of your success in your career. The rest is all about people skills. Who you know, how you build those connections. Most of the best jobs are never advertised. They come through networking. Right? So being able to build a good network, have positive relations to people around you, will be able to create all those exciting opportunities for you as well. These are some really cool books to check out. The Startup of You by Reid Hoffman and Ben Kasnaka really talks about, it's a slightly different approach than what you have here, but he also looks at the startup of you and looks at, well, how can you become more adaptable, be more proactive about creating these opportunities. Tim Ferriss is an interesting dude to check out. How many of you follow Tim Ferriss one way or another? Okay, a few people. So Tim Ferriss is an entrepreneur and a lifestyle hacker. He initially wrote the book called The 4-Hour Work Week, and then he's written The 4-Hour Chef and The 4-Hour Body, and different ways of sort of hacking your way into becoming really good at something in a short amount of time. So he's very good at sort of hacking the game and figuring out, well, what is the way that I can become, you know, a world champion in X thing in a short amount of time. So he became a super good chef. He became a world champion in some sort of dancing. What is the dance? Oh, come on. Tango. So he moved to Buenos Aires and became a world champion in tango, like out of nowhere. He hadn't danced before. He also won one of a championship in, it was either jiu-jitsu or kickboxing or something like that. It wasn't super pretty, but he just hacked the way they scored the points and then sort of reverse engineered his way and his technique to actually win some of those battles. Anyway, so he has an interesting framework called the 4-Hour Work Week, where he talks about how can I optimize the way I work so I only have to work 4 hours a week. And this is, of course, that will involve taking yourself out of this money-making equation, because as long as you're exchanging time for money, you won't be able to work only 4 hours a week, at least if you want to have a normal income. So you need to build some kind of passive income stream for yourself. And that's possible for all of us in various ways. And passive income streams are ways of generating money that doesn't involve you physically being somewhere and actually working. So if you are a programmer, you might be able to develop a game that keeps making money even after you build it, right? Or maybe you can write a book. Turns out writing a book is actually not as hard as you might think. So if you Google that, there are a couple of techniques on how to do that. Anyone can publish something, and that's also a passive revenue stream. You put it up on Amazon and you slowly start generating initially just a couple of bucks here and there, and then maybe $10, $100 a week, and maybe your second or third book eventually start generating, and just keeps generating money, right? Without you having to put in additional time for it. So you're building up these assets that will keep being valuable and keep generating income without you putting in additional work for it. You could also be a blogger and make money on advertisement. You can be a musician and publish an album. You can start a business that starts becoming optimized. So you're automating many of these things, and just setting it up initially will take some time, but after that it just keeps generating income without you necessarily having to put in all that money, all that time in sort of maintaining that revenue stream. And then after a while, when you've done this for a while as a side job, you actually start generating real money, and then all of a sudden you find yourself making $10,000 a month without having to work more than 4 hours a week, just checking your email every now and again, making sure customers are happy, and everything else is outsourced to other people or automated. So that's an interesting experiment. Not that you necessarily want to just work 4 hours a week, but having the freedom to then at least only work on projects that you really like to work on is kind of awesome. Tools of Titans is a book that he published really recently, where Tim has a podcast where he has over 100 million downloads. So he interviews really interesting characters, so athletes, musicians, actors, politicians, super successful business people, philanthropists, all kinds of interesting individuals, and tries to sort of extract the insights about why they became successful. And then in this book, Tools of Titans, he's distilling all these insights that he got from over 200 interviews with all these interesting people. So it's really definitely worth a read. It's just kind of a couple of pages on each of these people and all the insights he got from them on sort of what are the types of tips and tricks that they have. And it's divided into 3 different sections. So he has a section on health, sort of like how to become a healthier person and live really well and hopefully a long time. And then he has a section on wealth, how to make money and do that in a smart way. And then he has one on wisdom. So those are sort of more insightful things from philosophers and so on. Yeah, so check those frameworks out. Other than that, we're sort of ending a little bit early. So if you have time for some Q&A, either if you want to ask now. Yes?
Yeah, I just got a question with when you were talking about all the different income streams you can have, like
Yes.
an album or a book.
Yeah.
I'm sort of doing all of that, but my hardest thing at the moment is trying to get a manager to oversee that, or you have to have different people from different areas looking at different things. You couldn't just manage everything yourself. Right?
No, that's one of the big things that Tim has found out is that he was able to either automate it or to outsource it. So there are other lower labor cost countries than Australia, right, where you actually have a lot of really smart people that will be a personal assistant for you that can help manage a lot of those things that you don't necessarily have to do. Yeah. So there are personal assistants that will work for you for $4 an hour, right? $6 an hour. So is your time worth more than $6 an hour? Probably, right? So there are a lot of things that can be outsourced in various ways to take care of all those things. So you don't need to invest time in it. So that's one way of doing it. For those of you who are interested in figuring out how to start a business, on Monday I'm doing a similar seminar as tonight, but it's going to be super hands-on and actionable on how to launch your first business. So how to sort of get started. If you have an idea for a company, how do you take action on it? So it will be a little bit about how to fill out a business model, but then also about how to test it. And we're going to talk about how to create a beautiful landing page in an hour to start getting customer reactions and customer feedback and things like that. So that might also be of interest. If I can help out in any other way, here is my personal email and LinkedIn connection. And I also offer individual sort of coaching sessions or mentoring sessions, whatever you want to call it. So you can go to scheel.youcanbook.me, and there you can actually book a 30-minute session with me one-on-one over the next couple of weeks while I'm here. Other than that, I hope you enjoyed the session tonight. Thanks very much for showing up, and have a really great weekend. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.